Starting with next part of this chapter, which is energy audit. Energy audit is the key to a systematic approach for design decision making in the area of energy management. It attempts to balance the total energy inputs with its use and serves to identify all the energy streams in the facility. It quantifies energy uses according to the discrete functions. Industrial energy audit is an effective tool in defining and pursuing comprehensive energy management program. As per the Energy Conservation Act 2001, energy audit is defined as the verification, monitoring, and analysis of use of energy, including submission of technical support report containing recommendation for improving energy efficiency with cost benefit analysis and an action plan to reduce energy consumption. An industrial energy audit is a process that facilitates energy uses pattern, equipment efficiency, and overall building efficiency are determined in order to propose energy efficiency measures. The result of a successful energy audit is declared energy consumption, reduced raw material uses, and increased quality of the end product. The data collected by an energy auditor is the basis on which the energy efficiency suggestions will be created. The implementation of these measures will reduce manufacturing costs and also the negative effects on the environment. Here is the necessity. In any industry, the three top operating expenses are often found to be energy, both electrical and thermal, labor and materials. If one were to relate the manageability of cost or potential cost saving in each of the above components, energy would be invariably emerge as a top ranker, and thus energy management function constitute a strategic area for cost reduction. Energy audit will be help to understand more about the ways energy and fuel are used in any industry and help in identifying the areas where waste can occur and where scope for improvement exists. The energy audit will give a positive orientation to the energy cost reduction, preventive maintenance, and quality control program, which are vital for production and utility activities. Such an audit program will help to keep focus on variations which occur in the energy cost, availability, and reliability of supply of energy, decide on appropriate energy mix, identify energy conservation technologies, retrofit for energy conservation equipment, etc. In general, energy audit is the translation of conservation ideas into realities by blending technically feasible solutions with economic and other organizational considerations within a specified time frame. The primary objective of energy audit is to determine ways to reduce energy consumption per unit of product output or to lower operating costs. Energy audit provides a benchmark for managing energy in the organization and also provides the basics for planning a more effective use of energy throughout the organization. Here are the methods of energy audit. The type of energy audit to be performed depend on function and type of industry, depth to which final audit is needed, and potential and magnitude of cost reduction desired. Thus, energy audit can be classified into certain types like preliminary audit and detailed audit. So, talking about preliminary energy audit methodology, the preliminary energy audit is a relatively quick exercise to establish energy consumption in organization, estimate the scope for saving, identify the most likely and the easiest area for attention, identify immediate improvements or savings, set a reference point, identify areas for more detailed study, that is or measurement. Preliminary energy audit uses existing or easily obtained data. Here is detailed energy audit methodology. A comprehensive audit provides a detailed energy project implementation for a facility since it evaluates all major energy using systems. This type of audit offers the most accurate estimate of energy saving and cost. It considered the interactive effect of all projects, accounts for the energy use of all major equipment, and includes detailed energy cost saving calculation and project cost. In a comprehensive audit, one of the key element is the electric energy balance. This is based on an inventory of energy using system, assumptions of current operating condition, and calculation of energy use. This estimated use then compared to utility bill charges. Detailed energy audit is carried out in three phases: phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, where phase 1 is called as pre-audit phase 2 is called as audit phase, and third phase is called as post-audit phase. Talking about pre-audit phase, a structured methodology to carry out an energy audit is necessary for efficient working. An initial study of the site should always be carried out, as the planning of the procedure necessary for an audit is most important. In phase 2, detailed energy audit activities are there. Depending on the nature and complexity of the site, a comprehensive audit can take from several weeks to several months to complete. Detailed studies to establish and investigate energy and material balance for a specific plant department or items of process equipment are carried out. Whenever possible, checks of plant operations are carried out over extended period of time, at nights and at weekends, as well as during normal daytime working hours, to ensure that nothing is overlooked. Our next topic in this chapter is natural disaster management. An earthquake is detritus only when it affects people, their properties and activities. Thus, disaster occurred only when hazard and vulnerability meet. But it is also to be noted that with greater capacity of the individual or community and environment to face this disaster, the impact of hazard reduces. Therefore, we need to understand the three major components, namely is hazard, vulnerability, and capacity, with suitable examples to have a basic understanding of disaster management. Natural hazards are hazards which are caused because of natural phenomena, that is hazard with meteorological, geological, and even biological origin. Examples of natural hazards are hurricanes, tsunamis, earthquakes, volcanic eruption, which are exclusively of natural origin. Landslide, floods, droughts, fires are socio-natural hazard, since their causes are both natural and man-made. For example, flooding may be caused because of heavy rains, landslide, or blocking of drains with human waste. Next one is flood. Flood is a state of higher water level along a river channel or on the coast that leads to inundation of land, which is not usually submerged. Floods may happen gradually and also may take hours or even happen suddenly without any warning due to breach in the embankment, spill over, heavy rains, etc. Every stream flows in a particular stage at a particular place during different intervals of time in a year, such as a dry stage, half full stage, bank full stage. This depends upon climate and precipitation in the catchment area. A flood occurs when the volume of water in the river becomes greater than bank full stage. The extra water spills over the banks and spreading sheets along and away from the banks governed by available slope. This condition is called as flood. There are various types of flood. Here you can see the flood water gets entered into the city. There are various types of flood. According to their duration, floods can be divided into three categories: slow onset flood, rapid onset flood, flash flood. Slow onset flood are usually last for a relatively longer period. It may last for 1 or 2 weeks or even months. Second one is rapid onset floods. Rapid onset floods last for relatively shorter period. They are usually last for 1 or 2 days only. And third one is flash floods. Flash floods may occur within minutes or a few hours after heavy rainfall, tropical storm, failure of dams or releases water from dams, and it causes the greatest damage to the society. Here are some causes of flood. Very familiar cause of flood is heavy rainfall. Due to sudden heavy rainfall, the water level of water resources will increases due to the flooding will occur. Due to the heavy siltation of the river bed, reduces the water carrying capacity of the rivers. Blockage in the drains lead to flooding of the area. When landslide occur due to that of blocking will occur in the flows of stream. Due to tsunami, the water level will increase, indirectly flooding will occur. Due to the earthquake, volcanic eruption, there will be major failure in dam structure. Due to the flooding will be occur. Here are some effect of floods: loss of life, damage to buildings and other structures like bridge, road, canals also. Damage to power transmission and sometimes power generation will indirectly affect the loss of power. This include losses of drinking water treatment and water supply, which may result in loss of drinking water or serve water contamination. Clear water combined with human sewage in flood raises the risk of waterborne diseases like typhoid and cholera. Loss of communication system also is there. So talking about warning of flood, flood forecasting and warning has been highly developed in the past 2 decades. With the advancement of technologies such as satellite and remote sensing equipment, flood wave can be tracked as water and water resource department. CWC, that is Central Water Commission, maintain close liaison with the administrative and state engineering agencies, local civil authorities to communicate advance warning for appropriate mitigation and preparedness measures. Here are some possible risks. Here are some possible risk reduction measures. Mapping of the flood prone area is a primary step involved in reducing the risk of the region. Historical records gives the indications of the flood inundation areas and the period of occurrence and the extent of the coverage. Warning can be issued looking into the earlier marked height of the water levels in case of potential threat. In the coastal areas, the tide levels and the land characteristics will determine the submerged areas. Flood hazard mapping will give the proper indication of water flow during floods. Land use control will reduce danger of life and property when waters inundate the floodplains and the coastal areas. The number of casualties is related to the population in the area at risk. In areas where people already have built their settlement, measures should be taken to relocate to better sites so as to reduce vulnerability. No major development should be permitted in the areas which are subjected to the high flooding. Important facilities like hospitals, schools should be built in safe areas. In urban areas, water holding areas can be created like ponds, lakes or low lying areas. Construction of engineered structure in the floodplain and strengthening of structures to withstand flood forces and seepage. The building should be constructed on an elevated area, if necessary building on stilt or platform. Flood control aims to reduce flood damage. This can be done by decreasing the amount of runoff with the help of reforestation. to increase absorption could be migration strategy in the certain areas, protection of vegetation, clearing of debris from the streams and other water holding areas, conservation of ponds and lakes, etc. So here the concept of flood management comes into point. In India, systematic planning for flood management commenced with the 5-year plans, particularly with the launching of National Program or Flood Management in 1954. During the last 48 years, different methods of flood protection, structural as well as non-structural, have been adapted in different states depending upon the nature of the problem and local condition. Structural measures include storage reservoirs, flood embankment, drainage channels, anti-erosion works, channel improvement works, detention basins, etc. And non-structural measures include flood forecasting, floodplain zoning, flood proofing, disaster preparedness, etc. The flood management measures undertaken so far have provided reasonable degree of protection to an area of 15.81 million hectares throughout the country. The another one is earthquake. Earthquake is one of the most destructive natural hazard. They may occur at any time of the year, day or night, with sudden impact and little warning. They can destroy building and infrastructure in seconds, killing or injuring the inhabitant. Earthquakes not only destroy the entire habitation but may destabilize the government, economy and social structure of the country. Talking about definition of earthquake, it is a sudden shaking of the earthen crust. The impact of the earthquake is sudden and there is hardly any warning, making it impossible to predict. Globally, earthquakes result in the loss of about 15,000 lives every year. Earthquakes over 5.5 magnitude on the Richter scale are progressively damaging to the property and human life. However, there are many other factors that influences the damage pattern. Massive earthquakes are generally occur near the junction of two tectonic plates, for example, along with Himalayan region, where the Indian plates goes below European plates. The Indian subcontinent, situated on the boundaries of two continental plates, is very prone to earthquake. Some of the most intense earthquakes of the world have occurred in India. Fortunately, none of these have occurred in any of the major cities. According to latest seismic zoning map brought out the Bureau of Indian Standard, over 65% of the country is prone to earthquake intensity modified Mercalli intensity scale. India has been divided into 4 seismic zones according to the maximum intensity of earthquake expected. Of this, zone 5 is the most active, which comprises of whole of the northeast India, the northern portion of Bihar, Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, Jammu and Kashmir, Gujarat and Andaman Nicobar Islands. India has highly populous cities and the constructions in these cities are not earthquake resistant. Regulatory measures are weak, thus any earthquake striking on one of the cities will turn into major disaster. 6 major earthquakes have struck different parts of India over a span of last 15 years. So you can see here the buildings are collapsed due to the earthquake. Here are some causes of earthquake. The earth crust is a rocky layer of varying thickness ranging from a depth of about 10 kilometers under the sea to 65 kilometers under the continent. The crust is not one piece but consists of portions called as plates, which vary in size from a new hundreds to thousands kilometers. The theory of plates tectonics holds that the plates rise up on the more mobile mantle and are driven by some yet unconfined mechanism, perhaps thermal convection currents. When these plates contact each other, stress arises in the crust. These can be classified according to the types of movement along the plate's boundaries: pulling away from each other, pulling against one another, and sliding sideways relative to each other. Here are some characteristics of flood. Earthquake vibrations occur in a variety of frequencies and velocities. The actual rupture process may last for a few seconds to as long as 1 minute for a major earthquake. The ground shaking is caused by body waves and surface waves. Body waves, which are P and S waves, generate the body of the earth vibrating fast. P waves travel about 6 km per hour and S waves travel with the speed of 4 km per hour. Surface waves vibrate the ground horizontally and vertically. This long period waves cause swaying of tall buildings and slight waves motion in bodies of water even the great distances from the epicenter. Earthquake can be classified three types based on the focal depth. Deep, which is 300 to 700 km from the earth's surface. Medium, which is 60 to 300 kilometers from the earth's surface. Shallow, which is less than 60 kilometers. The deep focus earthquakes are rarely destructive because the time the wave reach the surface the impact reduces. Shallow focus earthquakes are most common and are extremely damaging because of their proximity to the surface. Next one is measuring earthquakes. Earthquake can be described by the use of 20 distinctively different scales of measurement demonstrating magnitude and intensity. Earthquake magnitude or amount of energy released is determined by the use of seismograph, which is an instrument that continuously records ground vibrations. The scale was developed by the seismologist named Charles Richter. An earthquake with a magnitude 7.5 on a Richter scale releases 30 times the energy than with 6.5 magnitudes. An earthquake of magnitude 3 is the smallest normally felt by humans. The largest earthquake that has been recorded in this system is 9.25 that happens in Alaska in 1969 and Chile in 1960.